Okay, welcome to a recap of the latest week at the undercover policing inquiry. We had 4 witnesses this week at the inquiry, 3 members of Globalise Resistance, plus Patricia Da Silva, the cousin of Jean Charles De Menezes. We started on Monday with Guy Taylor, who joins us today. Say hello, Guy.
Hello.
Good to have you on with us, as well as I'm also joined by regulars of this parish, Kate and Ben.
Good morning.
Just before we start, how do you feel this week's week of evidence went at the inquiry?
Me, I think it went quite well. I think Simon Wellings is going to face quite a tough day tomorrow and Tuesday. I think, I thought all of us did quite well in our presentations and what have you. The questions, for me at least, were quite good in the way that it allowed me to say what I wanted to say. And I think between us we've managed to put him in a very tight spot, actually prove that he's been lying in his reports. So positive.
Yeah. What did you think, Kate?
Well, I mean, I've had a bit of a mad week because late disclosure by the inquiry means that I only really found out how significant all the evidence from this week was actually going to be to me, right just before it started or just at the beginning of the week. So, I've been kind of scrambling to catch up on all the disclosure that has been released about Welling at the absolute last minute. And yes, have found it all really interesting, if a little bit stressful. I wish the inquiry had alerted us to that sooner.
Yeah, fair play. So, I mean, it's definitely everything queued up for next week with Simon Wellings, HN 118, giving his evidence to the inquiry. That should be very interesting. But we started on Monday with Guy. During the beginning, whilst doing the usual sort of introduction to like your political background, there was a breach or a suspected breach, which I just want to address quickly because I think it's important. This was once again, the Metropolitan Police made an application for a reporting restriction order on entirely spurious grounds. In a vexatious application, they attempted to try and prevent the broadcast. Well, they successfully prevented 10 minutes of the broadcast of the inquiry, slowed down the whole process for everybody, wasted everybody's time. I do not know why the Metropolitan Police applications for these restriction orders are being entertained. I don't blame the chair. I think the chair made the right decision in the right circumstances. He demanded immediately that it be explained to him. He made a temporary restriction order whilst he considered the merits of the application. He found them to be complete nonsense and rejected them, as he should. It was a ridiculous application. I really do feel, though, that whichever member of the inquiry legal team who decided that it was worthwhile to put this matter in front of the chair really needs to question their motivations in doing so. If it is simply due to the pressure from the Metropolitan Police, they really need to grow a backbone. If they thought that this application had merits, they need to give their head a wobble. It was ridiculous and just like a colossal waste of everybody's time. This may seem a minor point to most people, and I totally understand why you might think that. But once you're in the minutiae of dealing with the reporting restriction orders on a regular basis, as I have been, and the amount of like hassle you get for like making a step wrong, the fact that we're allowing such vexatious applications to be put in front of the chair is very annoying. And I really think that the inquiry legal team need to have a look at themselves and decide whether they really need to put every application from the Metropolitan Police in front of the chair. If there's already applications they're not in front of the chair, then they really need to turn around to the Met Police and say, stop wasting everybody's time. It's pathetic.
And I mean, it's an even bigger issue for people who are not at the hearings, right? Because whenever one of these applications gets raised, they cut the feed, and we lose. I think it's a minimum of 13 minutes every time it goes down, because they cut the feed immediately, but of course the feed is running 10 minutes behind. So everything said in the 10 minutes before the breach, or the supposed breach, or the claim of a breach, gets lost to the public trying to follow. And then there's the bit where the breach is resolved, and either there's a restriction order read out or there isn't. and then they switch it back on. And it doesn't start, you don't actually start seeing what they've switched back on for another 10 minutes. So yeah, I think the tech team explained that it was a minimum of 13 minutes just for somebody saying, oh, I think there's been a breach. And that's it. Everybody outside stops watching.
Yeah, I think it's more than that, actually. I think when you're facing a whole day of questioning, and I don't know if for other people feel the same, but I was in a very strange atmosphere. I've never been in that situation before, quite nervous. And then all of a sudden, something I said has led to a breach. And I was thinking, what the fuck is going on here? I don't know what, I didn't understand it. I've never actually been in the inquiry room before. And it just seems, it can't put you off your stride, and it kind of makes you a bit more nervous. And I found it was a bit later on in the day. There was one time when I had to explain a situation where I ended up saying, well, X knew 118 more than MT knew X. And I was thinking, 3 people I know, I've got to give them different names. You've got to really think about what you're saying in these things. And then all of a sudden, when I've just said, what it came from was that they put up a bit of is that the thing on the screen now? I can't see it. But they put up a thing which had been in The Guardian, actually, an excerpt from The Guardian. So it's public knowledge. And it was a George Monbiot article where he'd actually repeated something. And at the end of the article, he said, this conference is being organised. You can get a ticket from this number. And he put my mobile number in the Guardian, which made for a busy day for me, to be honest with you. But it was just, I just said, under that privacy thing is my phone number. And I didn't say what my phone number was. I didn't expose, I just exposed the fact that that's what it was. And it was obviously not an item which should have been kept secret. It was a bit mad. So basically, I think, it was vexatious. It kind of put me off my stride for a bit. Hopefully I got back in it quite soon. But I think they were just trying to unsettle it, and their whole history and this whole inquiry is slowing things down, holding it up, and making things awkward, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And well, I've just noticed we've just been joined by Noel Douglas, the other witness from the beginning of the week. We're just recapping. We just recapped what we kind of thought of the week overall. I just want to quickly get your thoughts before we press on. How did you feel it all went?
I was pleased. I think me and Guy kind of did okay. I think with our questions and that. I think there's a lot of the thing I've noticed about the questioning, and I've seen it with others as well. There's a lot of red baiting, isn't there, in the questions? And there's sort of central themes all the time. There's a theme of aren't we secretly violent? That's kind of the underlying premise to a lot of the questioning. And then this sort of red baiting thing around organising and how people organise, which again, I think it's meant to sort of suggest, sort of like I say, a Machiavellian kind of secret club behind the wall, getting the Molotovs ready or whatever. But yeah, I was happy with what we said. I think that I think especially with MT's evidence on the afternoon after me, Simon Wellings is in a difficult position with all of that accusation stuff. I think that's going to be very hard for the judge. Well, I hope for the judge to think that he's in the right on all that stuff is outrageous. But yeah, good generally. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, so hopefully we'll have some serious questions asked for Simon Wellings. Just quickly, Noel, I think maybe your mic needs to go up.
Sorry, it might be because I'm moving away from my mic. Is that right?
No worries. Yeah. just staying close. So we had the once we got kind of through the questions about kind of what Globalise Resistance was and all that stuff, we started seeing some of the reports by HM118, Simon Wellings, cover name Simon Wellings, and he kind of claimed that it was this trip to New York and supposedly some highly some amazing detective work by him where he managed to get stuck in a lift with Guy and invited specially to go to New York. It was a lot of that, something we've got kind of used to now, of seeing reports about very mundane events in our own lives, which are then somehow written up as if they're scenes from a spy novel.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it was just one of those ones where it's kind of the ability of him to just drop everything and go to New York, which wouldn't necessarily be in everybody's ability. But then, of course, he's got this expense account. An expense account that ends up having more than one use. I've just got a clip here for one of the other things he got on his expense account.
I want to ask you about what you observed about his conduct in the environment that you described in the pub afterwards. How did he conduct himself, as far as you saw, on those occasions?
Well, he never brought around.
I'm going to show you a document. It might explain why I asked you that question. Then the second paragraph of that states this: he did not take any drugs or smoke, but he did drink. He believes that his intake levels of alcohol would have been in excess of maybe 100 pints a month. Did you ever see him, for example, drink to excess at all?
I remember thinking at one point that he actually didn't drink that much. I would have a severe look at his expenses claim. I think his 100 pints a month is just fantasy. Not with us, anyway. He might have gone off to have a few pints afterwards, but I can't ever think I didn't drink that much, and I was very keen on pub life at the time. Okay. 100 pints, that's a lot.
That was me trying to get Mr. Mitting on side. I wish I'd said it at the time, but I mean, like, Wellings was not a full-time undercover. It wasn't like he was living with someone or sharing accommodation with activists or a partner or whatever. He came along to a meeting, and normally we'd see him about once a week, maybe twice, occasionally 3 times. And then there was the times when we went away with him.
In that much, generally, I wouldn't have thought. I mean, I know we were busy, but you know what I mean? I wouldn't have thought some weeks you didn't think anything.
Yeah. Mate, I'd say normally once a week. So basically, you'd have to drink 25 pints in that one session, which obviously didn't happen. If he came along to a steering committee and a working group meeting in 1 week, that would be exceptional, really. And if there was something at the weekend when we're building a prop or doing stuff or going on a demo another time. So, yeah, I mean, we didn't see that much of him. He spent most of his undercover time online, I think, looking things up. He just couldn't be asked to research it properly, or didn't think it was necessary, because the thing is about an undercover cop, you can say what you like to your handlers because they've got no way of checking it. They've got no way of verifying what you said. The stuff which we'll get onto later, obviously, about MT. He could say what he liked about that story, and there was nothing they could do to check it, and he could get away with it. And because we'd never see this story would never see the light of day had it not been for this inquiry, it was it was safe for him to do so. So he's been exposed as a gargantuan bullshitter, and I'd like to see him squirm out of it tomorrow.
I think it's really important to stress on that the inquiry is considering a lot of other officers enclosed, which means that nobody except the inquiry gets to see the evidence. Nobody knows the names, all the cover names used by those officers, or what groups they were in, or what they were doing, or what they said about them. And that point about the just colossal amounts of bullshit that is exposed when people get to see these documents and are able to say, well, no, that's nonsense. That didn't happen. And the fact that none of this stuff was ever corroborated at the time means that it's really problematic that the inquiry is considering closed evidence about these officers, where the only evidence they see is the evidence from the police. Because imagine if that stuff about MT, which we'll get onto in a second, had been viewed by the inquiry and closed. I mean, they would have had no reason to question any of it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It'd be interesting to do, and I don't know how possible this would be, to look at people's witness statements and see, I was given 40 documents of disclosure, and I identified 20%, 30%, 40%, whatever it is, of the reports about me to have been inaccurate. And if we could kind of extrapolate that across the whole of the unit, because I think it will vary from officer to officer, it would be very, very interesting. I don't think that the raw data is going to be there for us, because I don't think people have said, I mean, people have identified which reports they thought were inaccurate, but they won't have said, and there were another 5 which weren't. But yes, I mean, that's the stuff which is being examined by the people who understand and know it, whereas a lot of this material just isn't being disclosed, examined, or is being heard in closed.
I mean, I think what we can say with certainty is that a significant amount of the material that the inquiry is viewing in closed would be challenged if people were given the opportunity to challenge it, and would probably be proved to be nonsense.
And on Wellings, Guy, you were talking about the inability to corroborate what these undercovers were saying. There is a degree to which that isn't true, increasingly, because of the number of undercover officers overlapping and targeting the same individuals and events. And theoretically, if they're when they're making shit up, you should be able to see that they differ. But they must have done something in order to avoid that. Blue on blue reporting. They recognize each other. They don't report what each other are saying, or do they? We don't know.
They also they claim that they actively avoid being in the same places. But I mean, however much they actively avoided being in the same places, I would very much like to ask Mark Kennedy, Lynn Watson and Marco Jacobs what their assessment is of how centrally Wellings had infiltrated the groups that he claims to have infiltrated, which they were also infiltrating, because honestly, nobody remembers him.
Which brings me to another point about corroboration. You have these intelligence desks which are gathering the information from the various sources, not just the covert sources. Their job actually is to trawl the internet and indie media specifically for the kind of information which Simon Wellings is handing over. His cut and paste. They would have fucking known that his operation was mostly producing open source material, cut and paste directly from indie media or, public, other public sources like newsletters, posters, leaflets, or whatever. They would have known that. And they would have known that he was a colossal waste of money.
I mean,
but then I think that's. I'm not sorry to cut in.
No, go on.
Yeah, but that's also, I think, why you get this inverse thing of him, the exaggeration, don't you? Because I think there's that, and it goes back to what you were saying about the fact of some people not being able to challenge reports from spy cops that have spied on them, because this guy had all the stuff about his sex life and whatever, and then there's that little bit where he tries to say this kind of crazy drug addict and stuff, and that's just, to me, that's just him thinking, oh, I can imagine him at home almost in the evening, maybe on his beer, thinking, oh, I'll say that. You know what I mean? And that's what's outrageous about it, isn't it? Because obviously, especially with MT, that kind of goes to the point where that guy's life had been really messed up by those kind of reports that he knew nothing about. You know what I mean? And it's just that we've only found out through obviously the process of the inquiry that those sorts of things were being made up about us.
Maybe we should tell people what the MT incident is, because we keep referring to it, and it is the most shocking thing in Wellings' deployment.
Yeah, I was just going to quickly pick up on the first thing you started talking about, and I just looked up a thing for. I mean, it was this line from Don Ramble to Guy that there was somehow that there's this point about Simon Wellings' deployment being unremarkable, and the fact that he didn't do anything inappropriate, he didn't have any sexual relationships, and that the reporting was like factual enough that it was therefore there shouldn't be a concern. Which is a line we've heard again and again. I mean, you kind of spoke to it already, but I just wanted to sort of highlight that. Yeah, certainly. So MT. I mean, should we talk about the MT stuff? I don't know. Is there a clip about it, Ben?
I don't believe so. No. MT was, of course, audio only to protect his privacy. I don't believe there's anything.
But I mean, from the question of Guy, I mean.
No, I don't think so.
Do you want to explain it?
No. Yeah, I can. Okay, so one afternoon in a pub, an activist came up with a batshit crazy idea, which and told me about it. And we were sitting around a table, and Wellings was obviously at that table. Basically, this crazy idea was to make a fake suicide bomber vest. And when Ariel Sharon was visiting Tony Blair at Downing Street in July 2003, this activist would jump over the barriers. I can't remember if he put this much detail into it actually, but the idea would be he would get into Ariel Sharon's entourage walking into Downing Street, which is fucking impossible anyway. Take off his jacket, expose this suicide bomber's jacket, and wait for all the world's photographers to take pictures of him, and that was it. That was the idea basically. And so I told him that was a stupid idea, and basically I think Noel was there as well, and there was a few other people around, and we told him it was stupid. He'd probably get shot. Any political message which was intended by it would be lost completely. There'll be the most incoherent action we've ever thought about, really. So we told him not to do it, and he goes, all right, I won't do it. Basically, that was the story. Wellings reports this and transposes the person that came up with this idea, who was at the time a white bloke in his 40s, and transposed it for another activist in Globalise Resistance who was an Asian bloke in his 20s. He obviously, it's I suppose, to use the parlance of the day, it was sexing it up, wasn't it? Making it a bit more edgy, a little bit more realistic, a little bit more important, and basically. It's quite funny because there's a series of reports that mentions this whole situation. Throughout the reports, it kind of builds up Wellings's role in dissuading this activist from doing so, and then when it gets to much later reports, it dreams up the fact that the idea that there was actually a suicide bomber's vest created, and that he retrieved it and bravely destroyed it. So that's the thing. I mean, and now the Asian person who's described as Middle Eastern by Wellings in his reports, nice bit of racial profiling there. Basically, didn't know about that, and it was repeated in. I think it was repeated in an earlier part of the inquiry, and that's how he knew about it. Just in the last two years or so. So that's the bones of it.
Yeah, it shows the value of doing a vanity Google. So, Rates have always worried about that do a vanity Google. You never know what might be being talked about you at a public inquiry.
Well, this is a thing you spoke about during the week on one of the reactions, how people's names are coming up during the inquiry and they learn about it for the first time, and possibly even learn about the inquiry for the first time, but they also learn about the things that they're accused of, or the reporting that happens for the first time, without having been contacted necessarily by the inquiry, and certainly without having been a core participant in the inquiry. Now, the accusations made against MT are not so dissimilar in seriousness to the accusations that I found had been made against me by Jim Boyling when I got disclosure, and it was like completely news for me, and I'm a core participant. MT had no idea even that he was in the reporting until somebody had told him that his name's in there, right?
I mean, I think there's three different aspects to this that are all problematic. The first is that these undercover cops were reporting stupid conversations that happened in a pub as though they were serious intelligence. And this is something that we see over and over again. So even if that conversation had been accurately reported, if it had been treated with the seriousness with which it was treated by the undercover police, it's just a colossal waste of money.
Mm.
You know, it was a stupid conversation in a pub that went nowhere. Except that 4 years later, the STS is still filing reports on it, and actually filing reports on it under the heading value for money.
Yeah.
Which I find, you know, deeply ironic. And then the second part of this, which is where it starts to get really nasty, is the fact that presumably knowing that this was a fairly stupid piece of intelligence, Simon Wellings decides to, instead of making it an action by a middle-aged white guy involved in street theatre, as far as I can make out, he says it's a young Arab man involved in Palestinian solidarity and kind of Middle Eastern issues, which
he claims he's visited Gaza and Nablus City. That, you know, all sorts of. There's lots of extra details in there.
Yeah, there's extra details added over, and over the years, this reporting carries on, saying that this guy has visited the occupied territories, which is a lie. But I mean, I think we need to be really clear. Saying that this guy was Middle Eastern is a lie.
Yeah.
You know, everything that was said about him was a lie, and it was put in there in order to make this sound like a serious incident. And the racism inherent in that, you know, the fact that they felt they needed to take it from being a white guy to being a brown guy, and then lie about where the brown guy was from in order to make this sound more serious than it was. I mean, it's just, it's deeply disturbing on a lot of levels. And this is one of those things that, you know, was going to go unchallenged.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, and there was
This would be one of the things that Mitting would tell us. If only you had heard the things I've heard.
Right, exactly. And I think that it's that phrase as well, not just from Mitting on this single occasion, but also from the state in general. Whenever we get these briefings from politicians or the police telling us that there are large numbers of Muslims desperate to do us all harm, notwithstanding the fact that we obviously have had Islamic inspired terrorism in the past and whatever, but the scale and the scope of it is because there is a huge number of bullshit fucking stories that bullshit intelligence officers have fucking exaggerated and kept on file, that people can go like, oh well, I mean, you know, there was one plan even to blow up Ariel Sharon, because let's not like forget the fact that it was a fake bomb vest. I'm sure. Like we don't see all the reports. We don't know where all these things end up. I do not believe that this story like kept the word fake dummy at the start of it for the entirety of the ways it went up the chain. I'm sure that somewhere this was a plot to blow up the Prime Minister of Israel that was foiled by a brave undercover officer.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you look at the, you know, like with, you know, it's what they've done with Palestine Action, isn't it? It implied that there's all this Iranian influence in that, and that's the same sort of thing that's going on right now, isn't it? In terms of, it shows you how that's, like you saying, Tom, that's probably based on, if that's based on anything, that also could be based on absolute nonsense that some of the spies or that are around now are saying or whatever. But I think also for MT, it's just really, you know, it's the thing that they pointed out to him that this had been, you know, noted with Special Branch. So he had all that time without knowing. I think Guy raised this point, you know, this mark on his record essentially where that could have affected, like with the blacklisting, you know, if he'd have gone for certain jobs, certainly if he'd have gone for any job with the government or whatever, you know, that probably would have come up, wouldn't it? You know, I mean, as a thing. And like you say, it was the fact it also circulated this sort of life after the initial lie. Let's say it kept being referred to as a thing, you know what I mean, that kind of actually had happened. I mean, aside from the fact that didn't it create also, I'm kind of forgetting what it was, but it did create a kind of further a round of things, didn't it, from the accusation? You probably remember it better than me.
So I believe they opened a registry file on MT, and you know, the potential implications of this, you know, if you get this thing where people are described as known to the police, and you can be known to the police because you reported a crime. You don't. It doesn't have. It just means that when they run a background search, something comes up. But you know, whatever interactions this guy has with the police from now on, if they run a background check, this comes up. And, you know, I mean, we don't even know what kind of implications it may or may not have had for
Interesting that you're getting in and out of countries and all sorts.
And
Yeah,
I mean,
we did hear from MT this week. He gave evidence on Wednesday afternoon. At his own request, his session was not broadcast. We weren't able to see any video of him. There'll be no video kept. I believe the audio isn't kept in these circumstances either. So it's only the transcript that will remain as part of the inquiry. Totally understandably why someone would want to do this, especially someone for whom something very significant has happened in their lives which they had no knowledge of. I think there's very strong parallels with the experience of L3, with Operation Lime, with James Thompson, the undercover officer who claimed that this Hunt Sab was going to the south of France to buy a gun in order to shoot people who had been responsible for the death of Hunt Sab. An entirely fictitious story, which it was very clear from what we heard from MT that the way that he was characterized in the reports, even before this particular fake dumb plot was kind of bad jacketed onto him, this fake vest plot rather, that he was being mischaracterized quite significantly in the reports for his level of involvement in Globalise Resistance, the kind of politics he was involved in. Essentially, to me, he sounded like an academic who was putting on academic events that happened to have some political kind of context that crossed over a bit into activism here and there. But I mean, if you were to read Simon Wellings' reports about him, he was a key member of Globalise Resistance that was putting on Globalise Resistance events. It seemed very clear that he was, absolutely horrified by what it was claimed that he was involved with. And we saw the thing come up again when he attended a vigil when Israel was bombing Lebanon for the 10 millionth time in a few years later. He attended a vigil, and the entire story is repeated in the report of just seeing him at a vigil, where a lot is made of the mood he's in at the time, as if that was, was going to give some sort of insight into something or anything really. Yeah, deeply disturbing.
And then the final kind of deeply disturbing thing around this is this value for money report that Wellings produces. It's 4 years after the nonsense report that he's filed about this, and he is seemingly asked to produce something which describes the value for money that his operation or the SDS or whatever it is providing for the Metropolitan Police. And so there's a number of things about this report. The first is that it completely contradicts an earlier completely fictitious report in which he claims that MT had made the bomb jacket, the suicide vest, describes it in detail, how it was made, and then says that MT had agreed to destroy it and had destroyed it. All of that is complete nonsense. None of that happened. But then when you get to the next report, it becomes Simon Welling has bravely retrieved the fake suicide vest and has destroyed it himself. But what struck me most about that was the claim that the value for money, the specific value for money offered in this case was that he had prevented a potential police shooting of an unarmed activist wearing a fake vest. And that would have resulted in serious paperwork for the Metropolitan Police. I think he specifically mentions the paperwork. And inconvenience for senior officers and bad PR for the Metropolitan Police. And so the whole value for money of this incident is basically him preventing the police shooting a non-violent activist dead in the middle of a theatre stunt, and the bad publicity and inconvenience that would have entailed for the police. And he compares it deeply distastefully to the shooting of Jean Charles De Menezes at Stockwell Tube Station in 2005.
I think we can agree that this man is a total and utter wanker.
Yeah, I mean, it's just disgusting.
I think also on that, Kate, the irony of it is that because of this reporting and probably, as Tom says, kind of like future confusion between a fake vest and an actual suicide bomber's vest, wherever they're. They beefed up the security around Ariel Sharon, so it actually cost the Metropolitan Police money.
Yeah.
It was exactly the opposite of what they claimed. So yeah, another farcical thing from the SDS. What more could you want on a Sunday morning?
And another example of the consequences of this report was actually, so we heard on Thursday from Patricia Da Silva, who is the cousin of Jean Charles De Menezes, and counsel to the inquiry put a series of questions to Patricia Da Silva about this action and about this suicide vest. And it was really disturbing to listen to because, of course, she had, and her campaign had absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with this. And it was completely fictitious anyway. The only link to her campaign was this spurious link that Wellings had drawn.
No, actually, there's more. There's another link. In both cases, the police lie about the existence of
a vest,
of explosive vest. They lied about Jean Charles De Menezes having a bulky jacket with wires poking out of it, which is very reminiscent of Simon Wellings' lies. So yes, there are parallels to be drawn, and they're not. They have nothing to do with the activists. They are all about the police and being liars.
Yeah.
Understandably, though, Patricia didn't really understand the question and thought they were referring to an actual attempted suicide attack, which she wanted to distance her family campaign from. Understandably, but there was a lot. I had a lot of frustrations about the questioning of Patricia on Thursday. I think that was
pretty bad, and it was very clear quite often that she didn't understand the question through interpretation or her own English, and the answer that was that came was an answer that wasn't an answer to the question asked, and the counsel to the inquiry did nothing to try to correct or explain. If there had been any value in the question in the first place, they should have gone back and explained it to get an actual useful answer, and they never did. I felt that that whole process was kind of a show of listening, a show of having that witness, rather than a serious attempt to get anything useful from the day. It was just like going through the process, going through the performance of having her give evidence.
Just one thing, I had to work on that day, on where was it, Thursday or Wednesday? I can't remember. Anyway, I had to work, missed it. But was there any reporting by Wellings about the Jean Charles De Menezes campaign?
Yes,
there was.
Yeah, and not only was
campaign.
Not only was there reporting, but there was also 3 different officers. So Simon Wellings,
4 in fact.
4.
Yeah, but only three were brought up during the questioning. There was a 4th who's a restricted officer. Yeah.
No, because I saw 4, but then I could only find 3. But that makes sense. So one of them is redacted. But they all had authorizations which specifically said that their deployment would enable them to assess the potential for the Jean Charles De Menezes campaign to be hijacked, or whatever the wording was. But
just to say, those 3 officers, but there's the one unnamed officer who we haven't been given the cipher for, and then it's Carlos Araki, who gave evidence week before last rather. Simon Wellings, who will be giving evidence next week, and then Robert Hastings, a cover named Robert Harrison, who will be giving evidence week after next. I think it's Harrison's reports that show the closest sort of connection to the family attending their events, and weirdly posting online in his on Urban 75 forum about his opinions about the killing, which I think the opinions he gives on that would align with reality. Yet, we see his reports that he's kind of fully behind the fiction of it all.
Yeah, I think the key thing about the fact that it appears in the authorizations is it very clearly demonstrates that when the Metropolitan Police wrote to the De Menezes family and said, spying on your family was collateral intrusion, that was a straight up barefaced lie, because the family campaign was actually named in the authorization for 4 different undercover officers. And I think that's a really, really big deal, actually. I mean, this claim that they've made over and over again around all of the justice campaigns that they were spying on, that it was collateral intrusion, is, you know, it's insulting and clearly untrue. But this is like actual paper evidence that they were specifically authorizing officers to go undercover because their deployments would give them proximity to the Jean Charles De Menezes campaign.
It's interesting, though, that the authorizations are written in such a way that they would appear to support the pretext that it's about other campaigns or movements, essentially, rather than the specific family justice campaign. They word it. They don't say this is to protect the reputation of the Met, obviously, because that would be really, really bad. They find something else to say, and what they say helps to reinforce their claims now that they weren't specifically targeting the campaign. They were targeting those who might latch onto it. That isn't really borne out in the reports that are being generated on it. And I think we see the same with some of the other family justice campaigns that have already given evidence. But yes, it does suggest that they know that they are scum when they are writing the authorizations.
Given we're talking about Patricia Da Silva, I'll just play a little clip from when she gave evidence on Thursday.
Feel when you found out that the campaign had been spied upon?
Bom, quando eu descobri,
Can you up the volume?
Eu fiquei surpresa e eu me perguntei o porquê, né, que eu e minha família estávamos sendo espionados e a nossa campanha.
We consider reports that the Operation Hearn officers told us that our family were never targeted. Do you agree with that statement?
Não.
Operation Hearn had identified that the SDS had retained material relating to 17 families and campaigns. It states that Assistant Commissioner would offer his sincere apologies that this information was incorrectly retained, not, I note, an apology for being spied upon. What would you like to say on the fact that the police say that the information was incorrectly retained?
Bom, eu gostaria de dizer que, primeiramente, eu lamento muito que isso tenha acontecido, não só conosco, mas com essas outras famílias também, e que eu espero que isso não se repita e que...
So having been told that the SS officers did not directly target your campaign, how did that make you feel?
Sorry?
Are you finished?
Eu me sinto confusa, porque, de certa forma, eu entendo que a nossa campanha foi espionada e eu me sinto como campanha também.
And knowing that there has been police spying on your campaign, how did it impact your everyday life?
Saber que...
I'm just going to pause it there because I don't think it's going to really work for the audio version of this, which is kind of the reason we do these recordings. But I think it's just, there's a constant request of like, how do you make you feel? Which it's just, aside from sounding like a tabloid journalist looking for a headline, is a really frustrating sort of waste of everybody's time for someone to be go down to the inquiry to be asked to expand on the written statement they've given in order to give further context and understanding, and just to be asked, well, how did that make you feel? How did that make you feel? I think Patricia did a perfectly good job at the inquiry with the questions that she was presented with, but they were very frustrating line of questioning.
Yes, sorry about that video. You're supposed to be able to hear the translator, not Patricia, in this particular video. There's a couple of versions online with subtitles, one all in Portuguese and one all in English, which attempts to kind of center Patricia's voice rather than the interpreter. But yes, the audio on that is wrong. So we're only hearing Patricia.
Does anybody want to say anything about anything else about that? About Thursday?
I mean, I think, as you say, it was quite a frustrating day in terms of what was being said and how the kind of questions that were being asked. But I think that the story of what happened to Jean Charles De Menezes and the campaign that Patricia Da Silva led for justice is, I mean, it's one of the most awful chapters in the history of the London Metropolitan Police, and that is saying quite a lot. You know, they shot him 9 times, and then they just told lie after lie, and the speed and the skill with which they got those lies out there into the media. And one of the things that we heard from Patricia was about how the family were taken to a hotel. Well, first of all, the family were called into the police station. They weren't informed for like 27 hours, I think, after he'd been shot. The family weren't informed. They were eventually called into a police station believing that he was under arrest. And they were told, once they were inside the police station, they were informed that he had been shot. They were then taken to a hotel and Patricia described how they were manipulated by the family liaison officers. And we've heard this from other witnesses like Doreen Lawrence as well, about how the family liaison officers are actually in there getting close to the family and protecting the interests.
Yeah, these are not like victim liaison in the sense that, you know, trying to support the victims or the family
or keep the family informed about what's going on.
Very much kind of the snake in the trying to figure out what's best for the Met Police. So they've isolated them, kept them away from the media. And one thing that struck me is, like, what would have happened if they had succeeded? The story would have never come out. Jean Charles would have always been a terror suspect who was quite rightly put down by the state. The shoot to kill policy would have been made to look like it was a sensible and legitimate thing. But I mean, it's also a question of how many times have the Met Police done something like that and got away with it? How many times has their cover-up worked? How many times have they taken some family aside and convinced them that for their own good or for the good of the reputation of their lost one or whatever, that they should not tell the story, not speak to the media? And the public never hears what the police have really done.
I mean, I really recommend, if anybody isn't familiar with the story of the murder of Jean Charles De Menezes, please look it up. I mean, there's a great deal of information online. There's a very good article on the Inquest website that kind of covers a lot of the detail of it. I mean, when we talk about the lies, I mean, it wasn't just lies about what happened that day. The police lied extensively about the background and the character of Jean Charles, claiming that he was been responsible for a rape, that he had drugs in his system, all sorts of like completely made up things. I mean, they even photoshopped the photo fit of the person they thought he was and the person he was to make him look more like it. I mean, this wasn't just like kind of confused intelligence. This was a very deliberate set of lies, and we know that that they knew they were lying for 24 hours at least. The last 24 hours of the lies, they knew they were lying, and they were briefed to continue lying to the media and continue. And it's not just public appearances, but also leaked stories to the press that they were using.
Like stuff about the immigration status.
There was lots of details. I think Patricia was very good. It was very powerful when she said the thing that really hurt, beyond the murder of her beloved family member, was the lies, the constant lies about it that the police spread throughout the media, which continue to hurt to this day. I think what was really interesting was the parallels, I think, with With so many other cases we've heard. I mean, the fact that they were reporting on the family laying flowers on at the site of the murder every year, you know, something which I've been reminded of, you know, when we heard from the girlfriend of Blair Peach, Cecilia Stubbs, who was spied on for 20 years, 40 years rather. The De Menezes family was spied on for 20 years. She was spied on for 40 years. Every year, the annual event commemorating his death was either, you know, attended by an overt police presence or a covert one. You know, never to know peace. Family never to know peace.
So, you know, you can look at other. I mean, I was involved with the case with Harry Stanley in Hackney, where similar thing. He got shot by the police on the way back from the pub, and it was like the family were treated exactly the same way. He was left dead on the street, and I think some of his family members actually went past him, not knowing he was dead, and it took him a day to tell them. And again, all sorts of. It was said he had a gun in a bag, and it was a table leg, and you know, again, it was also. I mean, there's loads of cases like that, isn't there? But I think also the other thing with the Jean Charles De Menezes case, which I think is important, which kind of goes back to this, the way this exaggeration has effects and whatever, is that that campaign was very much linked with our social movements, because you had Asad Rayman, who's the director now of Friends of the Earth, who had been involved with Globalise the year before, and he became central to that campaign. And of course, George Galloway was kind of central to that as well. And you know, whatever we think about where George Galloway's gone at that time, is you remember he was a bit of a hero in terms of the resistance to the Iraq War. And if you think about the fact that I think a lot of this stuff helped contribute to this kind of, I mean, as we know, there were, as Tommy, you were saying, obviously there were the 7/7 attacks, but those are results of obviously what was going on in Iraq. And like these lies around Jean Charles De Menezes helped to increase that kind of war on terror atmosphere, which we then, of course, really directly experienced with the G8 in Scotland, both at the G8 in terms of the madness of all the Chinooks and the bloody militarized police that we were sort of confronted with. And then, of course, with the 7/7 attacks happening as we tried to return to London, I can remember us coming back on the train, and obviously there was a debate about whether we were going to get back into London at all. But we did, and we got back into London about in the early evening with the sort of with lots of chaos going on, obviously because of the attacks early in the day. And when we got off the train, I don't know if it happened with the descent, but with Globalise's train, when we got off the train, we had to walk through a cordon of riot police that were just waiting for us, like in a massive line to get out of the station, in a complete like intimidation, like, and also obviously with the justification, or with the suggestion that we are terrorists as well, you know what I mean, that we are part of this problem, you know. So I think that also has there's links there that I think are you know, the way that those lies about Jean Charles De Menezes just added to the sort of the atmosphere of the war on terror and the sense of danger, which then justifies the state repression.
Yeah, absolutely. It was interesting as well that some of the reports that we saw, the ones from Carlo Soracchi, he claimed that the Socialist Party were in touch with the family campaign, like within 24 hours of the murder taking place, that they were in touch with the family in London, but also in Brazil. You know, things which were totally untrue. People from the Socialist Party said no, that wasn't the case. Patricia said no, that they never had any contact with the Socialist Party. And I mean, just another way that like kind of undercover officers went, oh, that'll look good. That'll look good in my report. Nobody will know. I can just slip that in and you know, increase my suitability as an undercover officer. Yeah.
And I mean, what that shows above all is that undercover officers were aware that the Jean Charles De Menezes campaign was a priority for the police, and the authorising officers who were putting in those applications were aware that this was a priority for the police. I mean, on your question about dissent and the G8, what I really remember about that is that you know, while Lynn Watson was, you know, deeply infiltrating groups like the First Aiders and the Clowns at the G8 summit, she was actually living very nearby the 7/7 bombers in Leeds. Yes, in terms of Met policing priorities,
value for money.
Yeah, no, it really, but particularly disturbing. I mean, it was only half a day of questioning for Patricia on Thursday. It's a deeply disturbing story, as we've said. Really recommend people read up on it. I don't feel the inquiry handled her appearance particularly well. The line of questioning, I don't blame necessarily. I won't name the barrister who did the questioning. I don't think that's fair. I don't think she clearly wasn't properly prepared. I don't. From as I understand it, it's not her responsibility to prepare all the questions that she's delivering. I think that the inquiry could have done a much better job of questioning Patricia. Does anybody else want to add anything else about Patricia on Thursday? Okay, so I mean, just kind of looking through some of the other things, going back to about Simon Wellings' deployment, and like the experience essentially of people having to, having HM118 Simon Wellings was one of the most prolific reporters. As we understand it, he delivered 4,000 reports during his deployment, of which the inquiry has had sight of 1,000. Obviously, as co-participants, we don't get to see all the reports that are on us, but we get to see some of them, which is quite a task. Here's Guy talking about that.
Absolute disgrace. It's a horrible way of treating people, and we did nothing to deserve it. So yeah, it's really affected me. It's made me very angry. Obviously, I've still not lost the anger, but I mean, it's and actually going through this whole experience of the inquiry. I mean, my solicitor phoned me up and saying, we're going to get disclosure soon. You're going to get 30 or 40 documents to look through, and we'll have to come up with a statement. And when I looked at it, and there was 275 documents there, and I plowed through that. It took me bloody weeks to read all that, and it was really, really disturbing, and it's really, really horrible. It just makes me so angry.
Still feeling angry?
Sorry, I had a cup of tea delivery, so I had to mute. Yeah, I really am. I think, it has been, this whole experience, it's been like having an extra job. Reading through all that stuff. That included 100 pages of Simon Wellings' own statement to the inquiry and what have you, and then getting more towards the end. I don't understand how, when we're talking about the MT story and this mythical vest, I only got the one of the how great value for money the SDS is. I only got that a week before appearing at the inquiry, and that was written and obviously available since 2007, I think it was. So I don't know. It's a bit weird how I don't know what they've decided to release and what they haven't, because there's obviously, if it's 4,000, which I can quite believe, what are they holding back? That's one thing, and the basically it's quite disturbing. I mean, some of the things I had on personal life and stuff, and it was just so. It was like he was trying to get a job at Hello Magazine or something to try and get all the interesting bits about your relationships and all that stuff, and it was really intrusive and really quite over the top, really. So
the thing I also thought, when you're in the inquiry and like you're being done or asked questions or whatever, and it's supposed to be the same for everyone, you see little bits of what you've been sent as they're scrolling through the thing, and even though I'm not mentioned in it, so therefore that's why I didn't get it in my tranche of documents. You see, there's all these other things that are being said that, in a sense, are relevant because you were part of this, or do you know what I mean? There's just so much stuff, isn't there? It's just unbelievable.
And another thing is the redactions. When they were reporting stuff on, say, with reference to the Globalise Resistance Steering Committee and what have you, some of the people who were not core participants or MPs or whatever were redacted, and some weren't. In fact, on Monday there was two people in the public gallery who were both members of the GR Steering Committee. One was redacted and one wasn't, and we couldn't work out why. We asked for everyone when we submitted my statement, we said anyone who's not an MP, a union leader, or a core participant redact. And they've just been a bit arbitrary about it. And there's other times when we saw when I think when Noel was giving evidence, our American friend who has been reported was a US citizen who we met in New York, who came across a few times to see us and what have you. She was an activist out. She still is an activist in the States. Her name was being redacted, but then it just a page before the one they were looking for flashed up on screen, and there was her name. And it's just a bit, I don't know. It's really inconsistent, and it's quite dangerous in some circumstances. I think not to get that right. So
I
think
mean,
they need to raise their game on that.
I think the really key example is MT, whose name was published in tranche 2, and that is how they found out that they had any involvement in this inquiry at all. And then going forwards, it was discovered that there were all these really quite shocking allegations made and elaborated on over years, and the inquiry did grant anonymity. But actually, at their first assessment, they didn't even bother to contact MT. They just published his name. And this is something that I think anybody who was anywhere near any of these movements that are coming up needs to be aware. And I think
So that's ISM, International Solidarity Movement, Globalise Resistance, State of Emergency,
Dissent.
Borders. These were some of the groups targeted by Rob Harrison, Hastings, Simon Wellings. And yes, there's, from what it appears, if your name comes up in a Google search suggesting that you have a public profile, the inquiry may well have left your name in the reporting unredacted, and it will be published like that. So if that concerns you, you should get in touch with the inquiry, because nobody can tell you if they've seen your name, only the inquiry.
Yeah. So
the idea is targeting GR is ridiculous. I mean, he never stepped. The only thing he did about GR was after some demo, a demo at Aldermaston Weapons Establishment, getting arrested and happening to be locked up in a cell with me for an afternoon. That was all he did with GR. He had no other contact with us at all. Targeting my arse.
And I mean, this is the thing as well. I mean, one of the issues with the way that the inquiry has been handling disclosure is they only give you documents that mention you by name.
Which they can identify as being you.
Yes.
So, for example, if you have a nickname, or if the officer doesn't know your surname for a while, the chances are you won't get that in report, even though it has your name on it. I have examples of getting late disclosure because, like many people in activism, I was known by my first name and with a prefix or a suffix of the projects that I was known to be involved in. Nobody knew my surname, apart from the police. It's in the reports, because they, obviously found out who I really was. But as far as in meetings, I'm just Ben, or Ben from whatever project or campaign you happen to know me from. And that's true of a lot of people. So for the inquiry to accurately give you a disclosure that names you is really, really hard. And a lot of CPs wrote to the inquiry and said, this is my name. I was known by this, this, and this. I was involved in this group, and this group. These are the groups that I think I need disclosure about. Between this year and this year, I lived here and I was involved in this group or this event. Please give me the disclosure for that. And that's not what they're doing.
Well, up until now, that's not what they've done. We're very much hoping that will change going forwards, because what it has meant particularly in the case of Simon Wellings, is that the last 2.5 years of Simon Wellings' deployment, and I think it's worth you guys explaining what happened in August 2004.
Yeah.
But after August 2004, Simon Wellings' entire deployment appears to have been targeted against dissent and against the anarchists, the autonomists, whatever, who were mobilizing around the G8 summit. But nobody from those movements was asked to give evidence. Hardly anybody from those movements, although a lot of us are core participants, hardly anybody got any disclosure, because he didn't necessarily mention the right people by name. I mean, he does mention people by name, but not necessarily the ones that are core participants. So people just didn't see that material, and there was no evidence. I mean, we submitted a witness statement. We had 3 days to prepare that witness statement, between when we got the disclosure and getting it in time for it to be relevant to questioning of the officer. I mean, it's been an absolute nightmare.
Yeah, you talk about a second job there, Guy. It's a full-time job for some people.
Just to make a link to the next video I want to play, just so we can get through these videos. Yeah, I mean, like it should, if people are concerned about the way that they're going to be characterized at the inquiry, I mean, like, it's not just your name might be given, but the fact that you'll be linked to stuff that maybe you really don't want to be linked to. And we see this a lot. There's a lot of questioning at the inquiry around violence. Here's some of the questions that were put to Noel on Wednesday morning.
Has suggested that there is a tendency within the documents that he's seen for HM118 to confuse direct action with violent action. Mm-hmm. From the documents that you yourself have considered, would you agree with that summary?
Yes, I think all the way through his document, I think he tries to use direct action as a code for violence, or tries to imply that we're the most up for it, and that kind of thing, or we agree to fight with the police.
And as far as you're concerned, there's a very distinct, there's a clear distinction between those two concepts.
Absolutely, because non-violent civil disobedience is not. It's non-violent, and so, as I say, we're not naive. That can then bring the forces of state down upon you because they don't want you blocking a road or wherever it might be, right? But there's nothing to be gained from violence. We're protesting against a violent system that the people who head it up start wars. We are trying to do something different and create a world that's at peace. And so there's no sense in which direct action, in terms of how we mean it, has anything to do with violence, But I will say that we would defend other activists if they were attacked. We would defend people's right to protest and defend, if they were attacked by the police, we would absolutely defend people and be public in our defence of that.
There's another video.
Their right to take direct action and
so if I've understood sorry to speak over you, if I've understood your evidence correctly, Globalise Resistance didn't plan to use violence as part of its work.
No, because that would be...
Sorry,
go on.
To the best of your knowledge, were members of Globalise Resistance ever violent when taking part in demonstrations?
No, never.
Did you ever see HN118 involved in violence when with Globalise Resistance?
No, but I don't know if we're going to get onto this. I mean, there's obviously I make a couple of claims about
we will
acting as agent provocateur. Yeah, okay. No, and also it's clear that if we were on a demonstration and someone that we knew did some kind of violent act, we would obviously talk to that. But we would not. That would not be something that we would accept, because the problem is that from my perspective, and I think from the group's perspective, the problem with that is that then brings. That actually undermines moves because it brings more violence down on you. If you go down that route.
Yes.
And as I say, I want to involve them. I'm a Democrat. I'm not trying to make change through murdering people.
Good to know that you're not trying to murder people. No.
Not yet. Anyway. Sorry, no. Cut that out of the stream. There's certain people that I think deserve it, but I still wouldn't do it.
Fair. I mean, in terms of that thing, I mean, like this is like a common thing we see at the inquiry of. I mean, and I think you only got asked it like 3 or 4 times, which actually is quite good going. We've seen some witnesses have to like defend their opinions on violence, non-violence for 7, 8, I think 12 was the record number of times for one. For one witness, it can be a very frustrating process.
Well, yeah, especially because also in Guy's thing, you've got those weird, slightly contradictory reports from when we were talking about the outing of Simon Wellings, where the police say that there's no record of violence from Globalise Resistance and they don't consider us a violent organisation, and then in the next couple of paragraphs after that it was, but should we smash the organisation anyway? You know what I mean? Should we keep Simon in some way or get some to smash the group? Which is kind of, again, it's sort of, well, that's a very violent thing to want to try and do to us, isn't it? I mean,
it also highlights this role of the undercover police as disruptors of groups, which is something. If we go back to like tranche 1, tranche 2, we were like undercover police will repeatedly say no. There was definitely no suggestion that we would ever get ourselves into positions of power within groups, or try to direct or undermine groups at all. During this tranche, I mean, that has just gone completely the other way. We've heard from Jim Boyling how he would shape the decision makings made by Reclaim the Streets. We've heard from numerous. From what I understand from the evidence you've given, that Simon Wellings' role on the steering committee wasn't particularly influential. But the fact that he got on the steering committee in the first place, that would be a cause for concern. Only a few short phases of the inquiry ago. But he's kind of we've got to this point now where it's very obvious that the undercover officers were disrupting, undermining, directing the way in which political organizations were going, and that is a change. It's certainly not meant to be any part of their remit.
I mean, I think it's interesting as well that document that you talk about, despite the fact that he's reported over and over again, like the potential for violence or confusing direct action with violence, when it actually comes to it in their risk assessment, they appear to be totally aware that there is no risk of violence. So to some extent, they know that these intelligence reports are hyperbole. They're not actually setting any store by these intelligence reports, because when it matters, they say, well, yeah, this group's never been involved in violence and we know that there's no risk to the officer. And they didn't even pull him out.
Which we should talk about. We said earlier we would talk about how that, the beginning of his operation and the change, why that happened. So Guy or Doug, do you want to talk about the events leading up to the phone call?
Yeah, I'm going to have to shoot in a minute, actually. So I'll give a quick summary of how he got found out. So January 2004, I get a phone call from an activist in South London saying, "Guy, you got to listen to this phone call. This phone message I've got." And I said, "Well, play it to me." And she goes, "I can't. It's on 1471 or 1571 or whatever the answering service was at the time." Cut a long story short, a friend went round and he recorded it for me and sent me an MP3 of this message. And it was, I don't know, have we got it? It's a bit boring to listen to be honest with you, and a lot of it's unclear. But in the clear bits, it's obvious that it's someone looking through photographs of protesters, identifying them, quite often saying they're something to do with Globalise Resistance, but also other groups and other political leanings and what have you. And I listened to it umpteen times. I play it to everyone coming into the office. I don't know if I played it to Wellings himself, but he heard that we had this message, this recording, and so I was just doing my head trying to work out who it was, but I didn't do it very methodically, and I didn't do it as wisely as I wish I had. But anyway, so we had that situation. On the police side, Wellings realised that we had this recording of it. He said this to his superiors, to his handlers, and they change everything on their side. They have a risk assessment, which people just alluded to, and then decide to keep him in because we haven't found him out yet. But if confronted, they were withdrawing immediately. That was their initial decision. And And from that point on, every time he was at a meeting of Globalise Resistance, there would be a carload or a van load of cops outside ready to run in and save the day if we started slapping him about for being a copper. Although we wouldn't do that because they did a risk assessment and decided that we weren't violent. So all the contradictions coming out again. And cut forward to August that year, so 7 months later, I'm sitting in the office with the music on, doing something boring like stuffing envelopes in the office, and phone rings. I hit mute on the music. I take the phone call, talk to Simon Wellings, arrange to meet him the following week for a website working group, and put the phone down, hit mute again, and quite randomly, it's the stuff of Hollywood movies, I'm sure, it shuffled onto that recording. And he uses in that recording, I just listened to it again for to give it another bit of thought. And he uses in that recording a phrase that he used to use quite a lot, which is lots of stuff. He does lots of stuff like that. And he just actually used that in the phone call with me, and the penny finally dropped. And I called in a couple of people to the office. I played them the recording again, and quite security conscious. So we actually went downstairs to the Vibe bar to discuss it, because you can't hear anyone speak in the Vibe bar even in the middle of the afternoon. And basically, we decided to kick him out. And that meeting was on the balcony of the Royal Festival Hall just after a gig started one night the following week, and I think it was the 20th of August. The meeting started with me saying, right, before we start, Simon, you've been talking to the police. I didn't think he was an actual copper. I thought he was an activist who was talking to the cops. And he said, you've been talking to the police. The trust has gone. Please, my 8-year-old is sitting next to me, but please fuck off. And he had to go. Big show of disappointment and confusion. He cried. He said, "This isn't me." He pleaded. He sent me an email the following in the following days saying, "I would never talk to the filth," and basically pleaded his innocence. But we offed him. We didn't know. We didn't have any. I only got confirmation he was a copper when I got accepted as a core participant onto the inquiry. Which was a lot later, 12 years later, I think it was. So basically, we didn't know. We had no confirmation, but that's how he got thrown out. And I thought he'd gone. I thought that was it, And it turns out he went off to dissent in a very half-assed way. Really, I think he basically retired to his flat and spent most of the time online dreaming up things to say about people. But that was a story. I'm really sorry, I'm gonna have to go because family stuff. So I'll be there on Monday. I'll be there late actually, because I've got something to do in the morning which I can't avoid. I'll give someone a WhatsApp and you can let me in. But thanks for that, Tom. Thanks for all the work you do. It's fantastic. And hopefully people are liking and subscribing and all that stuff. And until tomorrow.
Thanks, guys.
Just on that, 55 people are watching, 6 have liked. Please like, share, subscribe. Makes a huge difference when you see these videos. But cheers.
I just want to say I hadn't actually heard that detail that Guy just said about how they had a van load of cops outside all the meetings that he attended after that. And that strikes me, I mean, first of all, on the value for money thing, that strikes me as a massive additional cost that they must have been paying in order to keep his deployment going. But it also strikes me that would actually provide a very clear record of how often he was physically spending time each week with people from Globalise Resistance. And that is something that the inquiry ought to be following up, in the sense that if he's, he was claiming 100 hours of overtime a month.
That's way. That's
1 hour for each pint.
Precisely. And there's no way that he would have been with us for 100 hours a month.
No. I mean, that's true.
Well, that's on top of his normal working hours.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
that's
Then even more
overtime.
so.
It's worth going back a bit. I think it was it Jason Bishop, one of the yes, it was Jason Bishop, who had to supposedly change his cover employment to something that would give him more free time to be involved in his target group. The reality of the vast majority of groups is, you know, maybe you have one meeting a week.
If that, in that time.
And you know, most activism doesn't require your full-time participation in one particular group. Meetings are, most people have jobs. Meetings are usually at times when people with jobs can attend a meeting. Most actions are at week or demonstrations or whatever at weekends because people have jobs. And I think, you know, these undercover cops basically had to invent and create a whole increased hours of activist activity in order to justify their massive expenses claims, their massive overtime claims. They had to be attending social events, and those social events had to actually be important discussions in the guise of a social meeting.
I'm not sure that they did, because that 100 hours overtime was a flat rate that was given to SDS officers. So I don't think there was actually any requirement to justify it. But what we do...
The claim from undercover officers is that the expenses were never enough, that the overtime was limited, that they did not receive enough expenses to cover what was required in order to live in their undercover deployments. So they would automatically in the maximum amount, as because they would always have to add to it, supposedly. I mean, obviously,
which is stunning, given that JSA was enough for a lot of people to survive in the same environment.
Like so many things they say, it's obviously not true, but that is the line.
Yeah,
I mean, it's funny. I mean, it's funny with the finding out of him, because it is proper Keystone Cops sort of thing, isn't it? So, but it's also kind of, it is like a spy movie. It's so crazy. And then it was interesting that someone had found a picture of him, or we presume a picture of him in the dissent era, because that was the other thing for us, was, you know, despite his claims on the thing, I never saw him again, as I say, but I can see now why, because obviously he, like, as if he was a member of the A team, he changed his costume, and the picture that we found, that we presume is him with a heavy beard, dark sunglasses and a black baseball cap. I mean, it actually is a kind of cliche of what an undercover cop would actually look like.
Standing out like a small farm in a make poverty history. Everyone
in the middle of a sunny day.
But I mean, look at it from his perspective. He's been outed by what I shall call the authoritarian left, and the police have decided that the police have decided that, you know, he's safe to be put back in. I think it's 4 months before the European Social Forum. They want to cover that. They don't feel there's that Globalise Resistance have actually identified him as a cop, just as an informer, and that they haven't, you know, kneecapped him or anything. So he's safe. So they redeploy him into the non-hierarchical left, and into like the autonomous ESF, beyond ESF, and nobody sees him.
I mean, that's not entirely true.
Lots of
people did see him. He did a whole bunch of meetings. He like, essentially what it appears he did. I mean, I can't talk about it too much because it's still not been disclosed. But he attended large meetings. There were various road shows that were put on by Dissent. It appeared that he went to like every night of those, but generally just sort of turned up, picked up the local leaflets, smiled and nodded in the background, didn't really get to know people, and continued on his way like that. I do have one memory of him, which I've mentioned before. I won't repeat it because I'm very aware of the time, and we will be finishing in the next couple of minutes. But I mean, I think it's definitely a strong change of tactic. to becoming a grey man, as opposed to someone who had built relationships with people. He became this grey man who just like stood across the field, watching what was going on and reporting on it and such, and using, as people have said a few times, using this new development really, as far as the undercover cops are concerned, of the email lists to like kind of supplement his understanding of the situation.
But the point I suppose I was going to make was more the fact that, which again is obviously runs throughout the whole thing, which obviously for the women as well, like the way they, his change of costume in a sense from GR to which is obviously why we wouldn't have recognised him, or I don't think I would have recognised, because obviously if I'd have seen him, I would have told people quietly, like, watch, this guy's dodgy, watch him. It just reinforces, doesn't it, how much it's a performance for them. They're playing a part, and that's quite disturbing. That's the way that you relate to them as a friend, and they are completely an actor.
But what's really significant to me about this is that those roadshows that you're talking about, one of the key core group organising those roadshows was Mark Kennedy. And for basically from August 2004 on, for however much Wellings was a grey man, he was a grey man standing across the field watching Mark Kennedy sleep his way around the libertarian G8 mobilisation movement, not to put too fine a point on it. So, yes, I mean, he was a grey man there watching me when I was Mark Kennedy's girlfriend. He was a grey man at the Festival of Dissent in Scotland when Mark Kennedy was getting very, very close to his girlfriend at the time, Lisa. And he was a grey man right the way through to 2007, alongside officers like Kennedy and like Marco Jacobs, who were all having relationships. And so, I don't know. There's some very pointed questions need to be asked of this man.
So we hope those questions will be asked next week. He'll be giving evidence on Monday and Tuesday. One of the witnesses was due to give evidence this week on Tuesday, Chris Nyam, from Globalise Resistance, also Stop the War Coalition, where he's still very much involved and embroiled in a very current legal issue about the some of the Palestine mobilizations. Wasn't able to attend on Tuesday. He will be supposedly coming next Thursday to complete his evidence, which is after Simon Wellings, which is somewhat annoying. Well, after Simon Wellings, HM118, gives his evidence, on Wednesday will be in from Maya, who was deceived into an intimate sexual relationship by Robert Hastings, cover name Robert Harrison, HN18. Also, before he gives evidence, we'll be hearing from Emily Apple, who was also spied on by Robert Hastings, but more significantly by Jason Bishop. It's kind of a bit frustrating that her evidence is being heard sort of out of order with that. I know there was a lot of questions she had for some Jason Bishop that weren't put to him at the time. We'll also be hearing from Atif Chowdhury, who was someone who Robert Harrison spied on. So that there's a lot more to come. And we're just going to play a little clip I've got here of Noel talking about the way in which he was spied on and some parallels with an East German policing unit.
Now this is a list of telephone subscriber checks, and we can see the various columns. HN118 is the requesting officer. 060302 is the day that was made. Now is a report by HN118, which includes details of your mobile number. And we can see in this document that we have up that a subscriber check is performed. What was your reaction to learning that your mobile number had been recorded and a subscriber check undertaken?
Well, this is just disturbing, isn't it? I'm not doing anything illegal. I've not committed any offence. Why is my phone being tracked, or whatever it is that's going on here? Like I say, nothing we did is secret. Everything we did was out in the open in terms of the meetings we were holding, the places we were going, whatever. So what on earth justification is there for this level of surveillance? This is like something that the Stasi would do in Eastern Germany. It's like, there's no justification for me for this at all.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the first time that it's been suggested that we've got a very British Stasi with the SDS. Yeah, do you want to add anything on that?
No, I mean, it is what it is, isn't it? I mean, it's appalling.
Yeah.
I mean, I teach students, I teach graphic students, and I did tell them what I was doing this week, because I think it's important for them to know, and you know, to kind of gives me a chance to talk about the stuff we did in that. And I have a lot of students from Eastern Europe actually in my class, like Romania and countries like that, and they were quite amazed actually, because they have that idea that Britain is not like Romania, and you know, do you know what I mean, not like the dictatorships that their families grew up in. So I think that kind of emphasizes how bad it is.
It's worth noting that request appears to have come from HN118 himself for the subscriber details. So that is basically all the people who phoned you and all the people who you have phoned within a given period of time. It's an attempt to build up networks of association. And I was interested to see that came from the undercover officer and not from like an unknown intelligence desk. And police forces all over the UK spend literally millions paying the mobile phone companies for that information, and it doesn't require, you know, a warrant or a judge or anything like that, like phone tapping would. They just have to cough up the money to pay the admin fee to get that information. Fortunately, most people use WhatsApp or Signal or whatever these days, and probably there's no phone calls on their on their phone at all anymore.
Yeah, so I mean, we are getting as we kind of reach this juncture in the inquiry, we are getting to the end of the deployments of the SDS officers. Obviously, the National Public Order Intelligence Unit is still to come with Tranche 4, but these last two officers will be the last two to give evidence to the inquiry. We'll have managers in the summer, and here's just Guy talking about how the fitting end really of the SDS.
Never a threat to public order. The police have actually said that in their risk assessments of us. And they spent all this money on us, and I think it's a huge waste of public money. It's a huge violation of our human rights, and it's ridiculous. And you know, the fact that this is one of the last deployments of the SDS is quite fitting, because this is a sorry story, which was a fitting end to the Special Demonstration Squad. Wish I'd said that better, but yeah, it was ridiculous, the whole thing, and it should be condemned.
Yeah, well, I condemn it. I think we all of us condemn it.
Yes.
Thanks for everybody for joining us this week. It's been a more manageable sort of length of time. Is there anything that anybody wants to add before we go and visit our mums?
No, that's it.
Right on. Well, thanks for joining us. It's a busy week at the inquiry this week. Please do tune in if you're able to. I'll be doing the usual coverage in the usual way. If anybody wants to support the work that I do in highlighting the inquiry and you know, just the nature of this, the way in which the undercover police operated, you can buy me a coffee. You're more than willing to do that. I do, as well as these weekly updates, I do live updates during the hearings on Twitter, and then during the breaks, I do videos alongside whoever I can grab from the public gallery who's been following what's being said. So please tune in if you're able to. Just go to the hashtag SpyCops on whatever social media you prefer. It's most active on X, but there's also a lot on Facebook and some other things elsewhere. So yeah, unless there's anything else.
That's it. Support Tom Fowler. That's what I say.
Cheers, guys. Thanks very much.
See you later.
Cheers all. See you again soon. Bye for now.